HQ presents Farringdon's Fate by Linda Finlay, read by Emma Powell. Chapter 1. East Devon, January 1854. Edwin Farringdon had much to consider as, with faithful black Labrador Ellery by his side, he made his way down the sunken lane where frost still gathered in pockets. His meeting with quarry manager Tom Wakely had not gone well. Not only were the workers demanding an immediate increase in wages, they wanted him to pay for the tallow candles they used to light their way underground, which at 5 each per day would be no mean amount. He conceded their point that the cost of living was spiralling, but wasn't it for everyone? Whilst there'd been a resurgence in both the building of churches and renovation of the older ones, and the Audiobook looked healthy, customers took time to settle their bills. However, priding himself on being a fair employer, he'd agreed to give the matter serious consideration. With these problems weighing heavily on his mind, he found himself back on the estate before he realised. Nettlecombe Manor nestled in the shelter of surrounding hills at the head of a long coombe that led down to the sea. Yet today, even the sight of the elegant symmetry and tall chimneys of the Jacobean building, its grey stones and mullioned windows bathed in the rosy glow of the setting winter sun, failed to lift his spirits. In truth, since marrying his second wife, Charlotte, he no longer found his home the haven it had once been. Keen to show off her standing in society, she was forever changing the layout of the house, purchasing new furnishings and fripperies which were not to his taste but also unnecessary. And whilst he loved his eldest daughter Louisa dearly, her forthcoming betrothal would necessitate yet more expense. "Oh, Beatrice, why did you have to leave?" he cried. Ellery, recognising the name of his dear departed mistress, peered at him through his one good eye and whined. "I know, old boy, I know," he sighed, ruffling the dog's silky ears and noting with sadness the increasing number of grey hairs around his chin. As if sensing his master's misery, the dog gave another whimper and brushed against his leg. "I guess we're both past our prime," Edwin murmured, pulling his woolen coat closer as a gust of wind cut through him. His monthly inspection of the great subterranean caverns didn't usually affect him, but today it had left him weary and chilled to the bone. "They say there's no fool like an old fool, and I've certainly proved that, haven't I?" As his loyal friend barked in agreement, Edwin recalled the events that had changed his life 7 years previously. Whilst on business at the Inns of Court in London, he'd been introduced to the beautiful Charlotte Calverley, daughter of his solicitor. She'd flirted and flattered him, and being much younger at 24 to his 43 years, her attraction to him had gone to his head. Bereft after his cherished wife's sudden death, he'd succumbed to her charms, and, on a mad impulse, had proposed only a few months later and brought her home to Nettlecombe in East Devonshire. From that moment she'd become quite capricious, and he never knew what mood she would be in when he returned home. She seemed to think that owning a manor house meant he had unlimited funds when, in truth, its upkeep took almost all the income the estate and quarry brought in. Once, when he'd endeavoured explaining, she'd wave such talk away as if it was distasteful, and carried on purchasing as if it were her right, adding friction to their already strained relationship. It hadn't helped that she'd failed to give him the male heir he so desperately needed to ensure that Nettlecombe remained in the family. Now he had 5 daughters to provide for, and, whilst he adored them all, it seemed the curse the gypsies bestowed upon the Farringdon dynasty had come true. Then, like an arrow piercing his brain, realisation hit him and he stopped abruptly, causing Ellery to stare back at him in surprise. When had he last paid a visit to her chamber? While she was always obliging when he did, it had to be admitted such occasions were inevitably followed by demands for some new acquisition or other. Clearly, things needed to change. Tonight he would go to her room and then, if the luck of the gods was with him, he'd sire a son. Feeling happier, he hurried along the wide driveway lined with magnificent lime trees that would soon be bursting with buds of new life, on past the manicured gardens that spread out on each side. It might only be January and freezing cold, but he could almost
Sample complete. Ready to continue?